why do you need a really banging log line? And an extension of that, why do you need to be ready with some version of a pitch after you've successfully sent out your log line and then someone says, yeah, let's meet about your project?
I come at it from two perspectives. The creative perspective is that it's very useful for yourself as you're developing stories to know what the story is. And whether you start with the log line or end with the log line, what it helps you do is kind of target and zero in on that core thread that's going to run through the entire script if it's a feature, or the entire series if it's a TV show. You need to be able to pinpoint that, because that's one of the first things executives will ask you when they meet with you. They'll say, what is it? Tell us what it is. And that's not give us 20 minutes of material. It's, do you know the story? Do you know what you're trying to do? And if you don't, that's going to be a red flag for them that it's probably underbaked a little bit. On the more cynical side, having met with a lot of companies and people, you have to remember that a lot of people working in the industry are decision makers. They're not necessarily coming at it from a creative perspective. And so you want to be able to just hit them with that thing that they can take away and go back to their little boardroom and say, oh, I got this great story about this whatever. And they can have one line to give back to them, or a short elevator pitch to give back to them. You know, it's as terrible as it is to say, it's like that's your mini blurb. That's the back of your novel that they get to take with them to kind of sing your praises.
They're taking that information and telling it to somebody else. So if they can't understand it in a clear, concise way that they could literally walk into the next room and tell somebody what it is and not go, well, it's kind of this and this and this, then they can't do their job either. So you have to make their job easy for them. Go ahead, Scott.
That's cool. I was curious, for somebody that, you know, many of you have read a lot of log lines, what is one type of detail you frequently see in a log line that just doesn't need to be in there ever? Maybe a little bit of
Scott is going to take over as moderator.
I'm used to being the interviewer.
That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. That's a great question. For me, answering that from reading log lines is you leave it unfinished. Like, there's a person who does this and they're doing this, and you're like, and then what happens? Where's the stakes? Where's the drama? Where's the big thing that's supposed, you know, like, where's that big moment? Where's the turn? What's at stake for them? A lot of times I just read, like, there's a guy who went on a bike and he rode it to England. And you're like, okay, and then what?
For me, the thing that kind of sets off warning flags in a log line is actually a lack of irony, which sounds very strange, but like, when I read a log line, because you only have one line, one sentence or two sentences to get people to the heart of your story, you're kind of looking for that twist, that kind of surprising element that wraps all of the little pieces together. So it could be as simple as, like, a girl looking for her biological mother discovers that her mother went missing the day she was born. You know, it's like, oh, okay, there's something there. She's actually, you know, there's some twist there that I wasn't expecting, but it's still relevant to the character. It's still relevant to what she's trying to accomplish. And that's a big one, because a lot of the time people think it's a summary of their story, and it is not.
You're going to say something, Max?
Well, I mentioned backstory. We don't need to know the history of where this universe or world came from. But I've noticed a lot of log lines that are presenting just the setup, but then, like what Shayna is saying, and then what Jordan's referencing, we don't actually know what the hook is. What's the second act? What's when I was going through the whole education process myself in college and after, it's called the unique action. What is that moment we're going to see happen over and over and over again, whether it's the middle of the movie or throughout the whole series, or the type of moment. So an easy way to look at it is, we need to reference a type of character in this type of situation pursuing this, and eventually getting to a point where, like Jordan's saying, leading to some form of a conclusion. It's not like you need to get to the very end moment of your story, but you lead the reader to thinking, oh, I can kind of see where this is going to go. But more importantly, we see the core of the story.
I would,
set up.
suggest we have a logline review service. We'll put it in the chat here, but you can use that form that's on there, and you don't even have to pay us to do it. I mean, we would encourage you to get extra advice, get advice from somebody outside of your story, fill in the blanks, and then submit. But a great starting point is just use that form to think it through and work on your logline yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say a big thing for me is always adjectives. They're way overused in loglines, and it's a very simple thing to just think about. Just take out all the adjectives. A jaded, single, blah, 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 blah woman is just like, I'm already kind of like, I just want to get to the concept. So it's always where a concept hook meets that character that's diametrically opposed to that hook is always going to be a great, you're starting at a good spot. We were just talking to one of our development slate writers, and he had 3 different concepts that he was just kind of toying with. And this is kind of going to your question, Shane, about like logline and a pitch and blah, blah, blah. You need the logline to sell it so that someone else can take it up the ladder and easily explain it. Creativity, it's lacking for sure. It's up to you to bring the art. You have to sell it first. So someone needs to be able to sell that, take it up the ladder. Then your pitch is the more detailed about how your character, that perspective, how that fits that hook. This writer, I won't give away his stories, but one of them was like, I read this kind of crazy true story in the newspaper about this thing. I was like, okay, yeah, okay, cool. And then he said, but what about looking at that from this perspective? And that's always just like, it goes back to what Jordan said, that twist, that just like, and then I was like, that's great. I want to see that. I want to hear that. On the flip side, the same writer who was great, he pitched 3 things. 2 of them were great. One of them, he kind of went, it's this meets this, and I'm kind of doing this. And he knew right away. He was like, I'm still working on that one. And so you got to get to that point where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I know that one's not flying yet.
I'm looking in the Q&A as we go too. So Susan's asking specifically about loglines, so I'm just going to ask it now. Should the logline be specific to the pilot episode or the show as a whole if you're writing a series? Or is it 2 different loglines?
In pitch decks, you're usually seeing the series logline first and foremost. So we get a whole sense of what the series is. And then you eventually get to a slightly longer, I guess you could say, pilot logline. Sometimes it's a couple sentences. It's tricky though with contests, certain submission organizations. What do they want? I would usually lean to series logline, unless your pilot has a really strong hook to it. And like Breaking Bad was a little bit more than the pilot, so you'd want to look at the whole series, but usually there's 2.